think I ever looked at anything or have any experience in my life that I'm not aware of this is the way I hold it all together, the way I relate it. So I know it to me. Every once in a while in my unconscious talking, I get some insights for myself also. That's what I hope to do. But essentially, it has to do with the fact that we live in a world of dichotomies, and that I think our experience in this world is to resolve those somehow, to be aware that they're there, that everything goes this way, there's something that goes that way. And then all of us, so we have one side, we have another side, and there's a tendency to want to things small children always think things are simple. They want good to be completely good, they want bad to be completely bad. Tragedies of divorce, because one's got to be good and one's got to be bad. You know? They aren't aware that they're both good and bad. So this is one of the things that we find out about in life. The older they get, I think the more we're aware of. This has to do, again, this is psychological, it has to do with Jung, who I got involved in. I tried to pay him out once. And one of the last things that he wrote about was his theory of functions, which he felt there hadn't been enough research, there hadn't been enough lab work done on it. He felt there were all sorts of things that could be done to prove it, and that could be very much brought into society to explain a lot of things. And it was one of the regrets that he felt. They think I'm a mystic. He said, if I'm only a mystic, I've been useless. Anything that I know or believe or feel, have learned that doesn't come out into the world is wasted. He said, I think this is one of the ways that it could come out into the world. But his theories of functions, which sort of was the basis of a lot of things he did, the basis of his introvert and extrovert theories, was essentially that we have 4 ways to look at the world. And these are thinking, which we do with our mind. We have feeling, with the body. Perceiving, I think he called this sensation, eye sensation or something. But anyway, for artwork, I call it perceiving. And then he said intuition, which is our soul, or we don't want that. I don't know. We're all aware that there's something beside our mind, our body, and our eye. He also felt that these things were, as I said, poles. And the more you feel, the less you probably think. The more you think, the less you feel. And the more you go into your intuition, the less you're sort of perceptive, and the more perceptive you are, the less you're using your intuition. He also felt that part of establishing what he calls an ego, which is not a term that the Oriental ego is, which is sort of self-centered. Ego to Jung was really a complete person. He felt that you really didn't have a complete ego until you had experienced these 4 aspects of yourself. He also felt that that was sort of life's journey, that you or become what you're not. In fact, one of the things he said, you must accept your limitations before you can transcend them. This is sort of an interesting dichotomy. Anyway, he felt that we also tended to be stronger in certain areas, either genetically or environmentally or a combination of the two. And that probably by the time you were 6 or so, you were pretty well established in what he called your primary function. This is where you felt more secure, either about your feelings or your thinking or perceptions or intuitions, whatever they were. And he also, not to confuse you, he also felt you had a secondary function, which was the one that you went to when you weren't working, what your primary function wasn't working too well. And he said it usually was on the opposite pole. He brought up the fact, which I thought was rather interesting, that if your secondary function is the other pole, it means that you really have a wonderful chance to be whole, but you also have a hell of a time putting it together again. So he felt this was a very creative sort of situation, but it was very difficult. It couldn't conceive to be very far. Anyway, comes to art, I ran into this after I had been working at the museum. And I used to go in the county here and collect children's art. And we have children's shows at the museum. And I used to separate them out. Ruin my knees, actually, on that cement floor, separating the children's art. I don't know if I ruined them there, but I remember one time I couldn't stand up. I had to go to the doctor. I think it was about 3 or 4 hours of crawling around on the cement floor of the museum, moving these pictures around, looking at it. But anyway, I would always end up with four piles. And these were the 4 piles, I realized, after I had studied. And I think that this is also the history of art. The history of art always starts from some sort of religious motivation, some inner thing, where it's always symbolic, it's always large, it's always symmetrical. All art forms have pretty well started that way. There's a huge big Buddha, China, or wherever they are. This is where they can come from. And then these things, religion begins to go out into the world. Jung called this the world of religion. Call this the world of art. Call this the world of science. Call this the economic, political, social world. So there's certain sort of characteristics that happen with the art. The art, religious movement begins to go out, go into the real world. You get a lot of action, physical motion, body work. There's a lot of movement. Sensation. This would be sensuous. Sensuous line, color, form. They all tend to be pretty sensuous in this area. If you notice, this is the, whether it's the Hellenistic or whatever it is, you go from the archaic to the Hellenistic, which is usually the high point in most cultures. And then it gets out into the real world where it becomes really realistic, it has detail. Usually a story. And then it tends to head back toward extinction. Also, this is usually much smaller. So it goes from the very large to the rather small. The end of the Ming dynasty is a wonderful example in China where they had tiny little Buddhas that were just completely detailed. Absolutely sort of ridiculous, I think. But anyway, I use an example of a huge mountain into the tiny Buddha. And then it goes up in here and begins to break down. It begins to become sort of there's a sort of order, space, ideal.